Hi everyone. So this is going to be a pretty short video, mostly for YouTube. It's a continuation of our book report here. This book, Sex with Presidents. We're going through all the sex scandals of, the presidents of the United States as far as this book goes. We started prior with Alexander Hamilton. Yeah, we got some yoga pants. We started with Alexander Hamilton and Jefferson, and now we're moving on to Grover Cleveland. So I will tell you all something about yoga pants. Actually, it was kind of funny. I changed 3 times for this. I was going to wear like some of that. It was really a 1700s dress, so I ditched it. It looked 1700s. Grover Cleveland, he's like 1800s. But I went in my closet and I was like, oh, I'm gonna wear this with these like burnt orange yoga pants. I go to grab the pants. I'm like, okay, they're down there on the bottom drawer, like at the bottom shelf of my old timey closet. It was actually a pair of my son's pants that happened to be the same color. And like, I, for a moment was like, maybe Candace Owens is right. Okay. If I can think of 5-year-olds pants or my pants, like when they're folded up, they're like the same size. Like maybe she's right. Maybe I need to move on to jeans. Maybe these yoga pants are a problem. I'll self-admit I have the same problem with shirts all the time. I'm like, is this my shirt or is this bro's shirt? Okay, because I like those crop tops and stuff. And they end up kind of almost the same size. But, thanks for the hearts, you guys. So this video is going to go, the first half of it is going to go on YouTube. And then it probably cut off. We'll chit-chat for a while more, hang out. And then that part will go to my subscribers only on Instagram. We got a couple comments. I love yoga pants. Yes, yoga pants are the way. Free country, who cares? Exactly. So, all right. So Grover Cleveland, you know what? I did something bad. I forgot to look up. He was the what number president of the United States? Somebody drop it in the comments if you know. But Grover Cleveland, he's from the 1800s. He was born in 1837, died in 1908. Here's a fun fact. He was the only American president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. If Trump gets elected a second term, he will be the second president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. So far, Grover Cleveland, and nobody else has ever done this before. All right. So Grover Cleveland, his life in politics started off in 1865. This was also before his scandals that we know about, which we'll get to in a minute. He had a bid for district attorney, which he lost, that go round. In 1871, he ran for sheriff and he was in New York. He actually won that. So he became the sheriff. Let's see. He met in 1873, I'm going to put this down because it's like the dates are too much. So in 1873, he was a bachelor. He was like a lifelong bachelor. I'm actually not sure how old he was then. I didn't do the math. But basically people were like, he's never going to marry. He's living the bachelor lifestyle. He was sheriff. He was an attorney. Okay, so he was the 22nd and 24th president. And people didn't think he was going to marry, right? Like he was just kind of living this bachelor lifestyle, really loving it. He started to have kind of like a courtship type relationship with a widow. He was 36 at this time, I think. She was 33. Her name was Maria Halpin, if I'm getting that right. Maria Halpin. And she was a widow. She had 3 children. And she, I guess, semi-scandalously for the time, she lived in like a women's boarding house. There was like a lady that ran it, but she didn't have a male chaperone or live with another female relative. So one day that year, it was like December of 1873. She was walking, she was going to a party. She runs into Grover Cleveland. Like I said, they kind of been like courting each other. And so he asks her, instead of going to the party that you're about to go to, why don't you have dinner with me? And she was like, no, I'm expected at this party. And he convinces her. He says, go to dinner with me instead. So she goes, okay. She just kind of, drops her plans, goes to dinner with him, which apparently in itself was a scandal back in the 1800s. a woman should not have accepted a man's dinner invitation on the street at that time and like gone straight to a date with him. So that would have been a no-no. So it was already kind of like, scandalous territory there. She goes to dinner with him, and then they go back to her boarding house afterwards, where her son, who's about 10 years old, is in another room. She actually invites Grover Cleveland up to her room. So apparently he's like in, I guess, her bed chambers. He's in her room. And, as the story goes, like she thought maybe she was safe because her son was in the room next door or whatever. But Grover Cleveland takes advantage of her. This is her story, at least. This is her side of the story. He takes advantage of her and, hold on, I had a quote here, forced himself on her. And apparently she says that he raped her, that before that she was just, a pure unsuspecting widow. And after that, in her terms, she said she was ruined. So she's very upset. She tells him that she's going to tell on him, that he raped her, and he basically tells her he's going to destroy her, even if it costs him $10,000 or that he gets hung by the neck. And that at the time he was the sheriff also, so she didn't really think she had like a really good chance of winning. So they kind of just go their separate ways. He doesn't want to marry her. Well, actually, I don't know if she brought it up at that point. But there was another issue with that. So she kind of done three problems here. So number one, she had invited him up to her room. So that looked a little bit bad for her if she was trying to get any type of, recourse from him from the law. Number two, she had accepted a man's dinner invitation on the street, which apparently that was like a no-no at the time. And she also lived without a chaperone, so she was kind of already seen in kind of like a little bit of a scandalous light because of that. And apparently at the time, they felt, like the authorities felt that like a woman couldn't be raped because she should have the leg strength to fend off a man. And also they felt that her lady parts would like lock down and shut a man out if she didn't want him. So for all those reasons, it wasn't really going to look good for her to go to the authorities and try to fight Grover Cleveland, especially also, like I said, he was a sheriff. So, they go their separate ways. What happens? 6 weeks later, she's pregnant, okay? So she realizes that she's pregnant. She goes back to Grover Cleveland, tries to tell him, he needs to do the honorable thing and marries her. He tells her, why are you blubbering like a fish without teeth or something, some type of thing without teeth, and basically is like, stop crying, like, I'm not going to marry you. And she is very upset. He finally says he will marry her. Let's see, no way they actually thought that. I don't know. This is all from this book. I did not cross-reference if they thought that or not, but that's what the book says. So he finally says he will marry her, but like he pretty much like takes it back the next day. So she's very upset. He keeps giving her money while she's pregnant, takes her to a doctor who eventually delivers the baby. And he takes the baby right away and gives it to his sister to raise. She is even more upset. She wants her baby back. And finally, he kind of lets her see the baby a little bit. She gets very attached and thinks, maybe now he's going to marry her and make an honest woman out of her. She already has 3 other children. And that just doesn't happen. So let's see. In our story, so she's depressed then. She starts drinking heavily. She does get the baby back, but then he's worried about the baby's safety, takes the baby away in 1876. So it's like two years old by then, puts the baby in an orphanage to be raised. She's so upset. She goes to the orphanage, tries to take the baby back, and they basically have to take it from her. And he sends her to an asylum for like an insane asylum. She tells the doctor all of her story, how she was raped, all the things that happened. Oh, thank you for buying a badge, Mike. I really appreciate it. So takes the baby away, sends her to the insane asylum. She tells them her story, and then they feel sympathetic and they actually let her out. All right. So what does he do? And I missed something here actually. When he named the baby, we have to go back. He names the baby Oscar Folsom Cleveland after his best friend, and we'll get back to that in a minute because that's an interesting side story that goes on and on. So he ends up taking the baby and giving it to a couple who had lost their child. Their only child. The wife really wanted another child, so They agree to adopt the child. She gives up her rights. She's like okay with this kind of at the time, not really okay, but kind of okay. And the child's name is changed to James E. King. I can't read my handwriting all the time. And raised by them. So cut to the end of that. I guess he grows up to be like a pretty prominent, like one of the first OBGYNs. And I don't think he ever reconnects with his mother, but he ends up having a good life. He's the son of these other people who take good care of him and didn't have any other children. And obviously he goes on to be educated and have success. She disappears. And at that point, Grover Cleveland's like, okay, I'm pretty much like done with this lady. Like, phew, right. So going back, so that was 1876. So he was sheriff. 1882, he decides, that's when he runs for mayor of New York and he wins. So he becomes the mayor. He's a Democrat. So the thing with Grover Cleveland is, and the book talks about this, he kind of learned from Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton, who we talked about prior, he felt himself to be a very principled man of the people, like a true representative of the Americans, like with principles and honor. But as we know, Alexander Hamilton had some personal scandals. Unfortunately for Alexander Hamilton, those spilled over into his professional life because he ended up stealing money from the treasury when he was blackmailed by his mistress's husband. But Grover Cleveland, unlike Alexander Hamilton, knows a little bit better how to separate these things. He stays to be like a man of honor in the eyes of the people, doing the good work. He's really against corruption. He fights government corruption in all of his roles that he has. All the places where all the money is just flowing to these corrupt organizations. Grover Cleveland is stepping in there and cleaning it up. He's making it better and showing the results. That's why he keeps getting elected for higher and higher offices very quickly. So he becomes mayor there in New York. And then that was 1882. Right away in 1883, he gets elected to be governor of the state of New York. He serves as governor for only 2 years because he actually, hold on. I'm losing myself. In 1885, he is elected president of the United States. There was a couple times when this Maria Halpin thing started to kind of bubble up, but it never really, became anything for a time. So let's see. Someone says they're all bought, sold, left and right oligarchy. Yeah. So let me see. I need to open my book, but I'm pretty sure it was kind of right around when he was going for when his first term of president, it did start to come up. That those first 2 elections, he kind of did fine. Third election, the Maria Halpin story started to surface. He tried to kind of quash that with money to her a few times. There was a couple of, the Democrats that he was with and everything, trying to kind of quash that, pay her off. At one point, let me see, it was a lot of money. Yeah, they tried to get her to sign a statement clearing his name as the stories came up in newspapers and stuff. And they told her that she would be paid $10,000, which was about $260,000 in today's money. And she refused. So Maria, she has a total chip on her shoulder. And we don't know, we don't know if the rape story is true or if, she thought that if they had relations that he would marry her. We really don't know. They didn't have any evidence. They didn't really pass judgment in the book. They pretty much made it sound like that was her story. He raped her. He never tells his side of the story because unlike Alexander Hamilton, who jumped to his own defense, wrote this lengthy article to try to clear his name when his scandal with his Maria came out, Grover Cleveland does nothing. He doesn't comment. He pulls a Thomas Jefferson and doesn't say anything. And because of that, people see him as neither a liar or they're not able to corroborate that they're not able to fully assess that he actually even had this scandal. So there's a lot of, his opposition are talking about this. They come up with some chant that they say him that's "Mama, where's my pa?" And they're chanting this at him. And, trying to make it sound okay, look, there's this woman here. There's this child that you fathered. And, but he never says, he doesn't say anything. He just continues, stay away from girls named Maria, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I guess back then in those times, And we have two examples here. Yeah, so she was upset. Maria Halpin, she goes actually to a newspaper and writes, what happened, that he raped her, all of this stuff. And once again, like really nothing ever comes of it. So her story kind of goes on, she tells all the abduction, all that stuff. It doesn't matter. He still ends up getting elected. He wins president. She, over time, kind of like moves on. She gets married 2 other times. Let's see. Somebody says, unless you're Carlos Santos. Oh yeah, it's Carlos Santana. Maria remind me of a West Side Story. Someone said, although I could become president. You want to be president? Stay away from girls. Okay. So that's that whole story. So Grover Cleveland never really comments on this. So we're really unable to tell what happened. He doesn't defend himself or deny it. People really liked him as a politician. They felt that he really was like as upstanding as he said as a politician, and he never lied to them or tried to tell them any story about what had happened with her. So because of that, it was like people didn't see him as a liar, and they only saw the good works he did in the government, and so they just basically forgave him for it. So here's where the story gets a little weird. Going back to that, and I think his name was Oscar Folsom too, that his son was named after. I know his last name was Folsom. His friend had a child. That was his best friend. He had a child when Grover Cleveland was 27 years old, a baby. And her name's like totally escaping me. Hold on. I wrote it down somewhere. He had a baby, and he asked Grover Cleveland to be, Frances. Yeah, Frances Folsom. That was his daughter. He asked Grover Cleveland to be his daughter's basically like godparent, okay? The dad dies when the girl's about 11. So then he's executor of his estate, taking care of the family. He's always over there. He's calling on them all the time. Like he's a lifelong bachelor. He's never been married. By this time he's getting a little older and stuff. He must have been probably in his like late 30s. Yeah, late 30s. And so people are thinking that he's going to marry the wife and take care of this family. And apparently at some point, like a maid or something made a comment about it. And he says, why does everyone think I'm going to marry like basically the old matron or whatever? Why wouldn't they think I'm going to marry the daughter? And I don't know exactly how old she was when he said that. It could have been like a little bit later on. But he had basically kind of been stepping in since the dad was, or since the girl was 11, helping to take care of their estate and stuff. So when she's 21 and he's 49, he's known her since she was born. He started off her godfather. He marries her while he's in the White House. This was the very first, and probably only, I believe, White House marriage. So they get married, and so she's 21, he's 49. People adore her. She is beautiful. She becomes like the darling first lady of the country. I think they have 5 children together. Somebody said lots of nepotism and inbreeding with these strange elite. Yeah, so it's a pretty weird story. So, he marries her. That's his only wife. They spend, the next few years in the White House, and then the next election comes up and he actually doesn't win. But apparently Frances, the first lady, most beloved, she's a very beloved first lady at that time. She tells them at the White House, take care of our stuff because we're going to be back in 4 years from now. And for those 4 years, they kind of just focus on their family and the having children and everything. And then 4 years later, he is reelected, as we know. They go back to the White House, serve the second term. And I don't think he lived much longer than that. I'm trying to remember, because that was till 1889. Yeah, and then he got, they left the White House, and then he died in 1908. But pretty interesting story. Let's see, someone's 22nd, the 22nd and 24th president. He had been accused of rape. had this whole scandal, never commented on it. From what it sounds like, he did a lot of good work in politics. We never really know the full story there. He obviously was a father of his child. There have been a whole lot of articles trying to be written against Maria Halpin to say that although she was a widow, she was actually having a relationship with three men. And I think that the friend was maybe even one of them that they tried to implicate. But then supposedly he was so chivalrous. This was like stories they painted about the situation, that he like stepped up and as the only bachelor and like took, responsibility for this, and that kind of like put him in a better light and everything. So it was kind of a crazy story. But then we have the second crazy story where he's godfather to a baby, goes on to, like, when the father dies, be basically executor of the estate and everything, and then marry her when she's 21. So kind of a weird guy. Crazy history there, but that was our that was our third chapter in this book. So now you know the real history, the nitty gritty about Grover Cleveland and what he was up to, the things that you probably didn't learn in your high school or college class. If you did, let me know. But I would doubt that they really taught us that in high school or college. And so that wraps it up for as far as the YouTube part. Thank you everyone for watching. Also check out my page on Instagram